Luke 17:26. As it was in the days of Noah, so shall it be in the days of the coming of the Son of Man. Now, to me, this statement has always seemed to go along with what Jesus said in Matthew 7:14. Straight is the gate, and narrow is the way which leadeth unto life, and few there be which find it. And also Matthew 22:14. For many are called, but few are chosen. Among similar passages spoken by Jesus. 1 Peter 3:20 also reminds us that only 8 were saved on the ark. Now, I'm not saying that I think that only 8 people will go up in the rapture. But I do believe the idea Jesus is trying to get across is that we need to be busy about the Father's business so that as many can be saved as possible. Because Jesus also said in Luke 10:2, the harvest is truly great, but the laborers are few. Pray ye therefore the Lord of the harvest, that He would send forth laborers into His harvest. That's our job as the last days church. Compared to the population of the world, the number of those who claim Christianity is currently actually few. And the number of those who are truly dedicated to fulfilling God's will among those who claim Christianity are fewer still. And this is precisely why Jesus said in Luke 13:24, strive to enter in at the strait gate. For many, I say unto you, will seek to enter in and shall not be able. They will seek to enter in. They're looking to go that way, but they're not striving. They think they're on the right path, but they're not striving. The choice is ours. Jesus makes it clear that effort will be required. Only those who fully lean on Him for the necessary strength will be equipped to enter in when that day comes. We can do all things through Christ Jesus our Lord, and through Him we will have the opportunity for a victorious conclusion of the difficulties that we face in life on earth. And just as Noah did in his day, Jesus is calling us to go out into the highways and hedges and compel them to come in, that His house may be filled. That's Luke 14:23. Any thoughts there? Okay.
Something I've struggled with a lot is it's going to take effort to lean on Him in everything we do. And that's the part I'm having trouble with. I mean, if we have to lean on Him for everything we do, then where's the effort? And if it takes effort, then
He gives you the strength, but you have to be willing to do the work. He will work through us, but it still requires effort on our part. If you're getting ready to leave church and you go home, unless you put on your jacket, grab your phone, get your Sunday school book, walk out the door, unlock your car, get in it, turn it on, drive the direction it takes you to get home, you're not going to get there. Those things are required. God has given you the mental faculties to understand the concept of driving. But you have to drive. He's given you the physical ability to get up from your seat, to walk to the car, to get in it, to do the things that are required to get you from this church to your house. He's done that. But you have to. He's given you those things, those abilities, those physical characteristics and attributes, the mental capability to grasp the concept of driving and directions, but the effort is yours. And so it is spiritually. And if I'm wrong, if this doesn't make any sense to anybody else, help me, because I may misunderstand this. This is my understanding of it. Spiritually, it's the same thing. He's given us the knowledge, the spiritual faculty to acknowledge Him as the Son of God. He's given all humanity that spiritual faculty to acknowledge Him. Whether we accept it and recognize it and go follow through with it, that's our choice. Like I said, just because you want to go home, that doesn't get you there. I want to go to heaven, but I'm just going to sit here. It requires us using the abilities, the faculties, the spiritual strength that God has given us to get home spiritually. God's given us His Word. God's given us the church. God's given us a fellowship, a Christian fellowship that we can use one another to strengthen each other, to help each other along this path, because although it's similar in concept to getting in your car and driving to your house, that may be 15, 20 minutes. This journey that we're talking about spiritually has a potential to be 75, 85, 95 years. So it's a lot longer journey. It requires more time. It requires more effort. And you know the path home because you've been there several times. None of us have yet been to heaven. Not one of us sitting here today. So it requires us helping one another. I appreciate so much when I get the feedback from you guys. This is helping me on my journey when you ask questions, because that forces me to think about things that I haven't thought about. Sometimes it's something that I've already thought about, but sometimes it's not. And maybe some things that somebody else needed that they weren't thinking about, they had never considered. And so does that analogy have any bearing on understanding?
Kind of. I feel comfortable with my ability to drive home and get up and walk and all that. But
And
as far as
spiritually,
God and everything I do, I don't feel that I have that. I don't feel comfortable in that ability.
And that's good. That's an excellent thing, because we're just talking about the Jews here who felt so comfortable that they were going the wrong way. They were so comfortable in what God had given them, what God had showed them, that they believed they were going the right direction when they were going exactly the opposite. And it's that very lack of comfort that we have that draws us to the church house on Sunday morning, Wednesday evening, Sunday evening. It's what draws us back to our Bibles during the day when we have free time to seek out what God would have for us. It's what draws us to our prayer closets each day and causes us to seek God, because we don't know. It's like Thomas said, we don't know where you're going. How can we know the way? And that's pretty much where we are today. I mean, we put Thomas down. He doubted. We put Thomas down. He didn't know the way. We don't know the way. That's why we're here today. That's why we're in Sunday school. That's why I'm getting ready to sit down here in a few minutes and Pastor's going to get up here and speak. Because we don't know the way. Jesus is the way. How do we do that? How do we go from I am the way, the truth, and the life, as Jesus said? Okay, well, how do I do that? Going back to the analogy of you going home, there was a time when you didn't know how to drive. When the time came for you to learn how to drive, you didn't just get in a car and go because you knew everything. It took a little bit of learning. If you drove a manual transmission car, it might have taken you a little bit more learning. You had to learn all the rules of the road. You had to make the effort to go down to the DMV and get your driver's license and take the test and everything. And before all that, you had to do a whole lot of work to understand all those concepts that we just spoke about earlier that you're very familiar with now because you're in your 40s and you've been driving for a while. But that didn't happen all at once. Right. And this journey that we're on is no different. I love to tell the story of Wendy learning to drive a manual transmission. I'm not going to go there today. But anyone who's done it knows the effort that's required. It's something that you have to focus on. It's not something most people just get in a car and go do. And if something is simple, I mean, we look at our lives, every one of us here doesn't think twice of get behind a wheel and driving a car. None of us. Even the youngest of us don't think anything of it. Just do it. Because it's so familiar. But what we're talking about here is so many millions of times more complex. And so, in order to learn how to drive, it may take you a couple of weeks, it may take you a couple of months. Worst case scenario. If you're really bad, it might take you a year. Really bad. But this that we're talking about here, it takes a lifetime. And I always look back at Paul and what he said. He said, and I always kind of break it up. He said, neither were I already perfect. He wasn't perfect. But what did he do? He pressed toward the mark. He was still learning. He was striving. He was striving to reach that goal. Yes.
It's the thing that you always say, you have to continue with everything, continue learning, continue growing in the Lord. I think about when your dad was working with computers and evidently pretty good at it. I mean, he worked for IBM.
Right.
But after a while, evidently, from what I've heard, he wasn't into it as much. I mean, he didn't have YouTube and all these classes to take.
Yeah.
So some of that was the knowledge that he had was now obsolete because computer technology was just going crazy.
Right.
And if
faster
we
than he
don't
could learn.
focus on things, or even learning Spanish or Japanese or whatever, we have to continue that. And when we continue growing and seeking the Lord, He's going to open up things and help us. But we have to
put forth the effort.
Yeah,
that's exactly right.
In reading our Bible, we have to put the effort in praying and seeking the Lord and being around those people that help us to grow and not to help make it worse. To help us go back, but help us move forward.
That's an excellent point. I appreciate it. As soon as you started talking, the thought came to me. When a doctor finishes school, what's the first thing that they want to do? They want to start a practice. They start, after they get out of school, they start a practice. That's what they call it. Why do doctors call it a practice? Because you can't learn it all. No individual can learn it all. And what they're doing is now that they're out of school, they're practicing what they already learned, and they're continuing to learn.
And they'll never get to the point where they know everything because everybody's body's different.
That's exactly right.
Your heart surgery is going to be different from my heart surgery, and everything they learn from your heart surgery might or might not help in my heart surgery or whatever.
Whatever it is, yeah.
But they're continuing to have to learn and grow.
Absolutely. That's when we look at Christianity, we don't need to look at it as, oh, I wish I could graduate so I could sit back and relax a little bit, because it's not going to happen. The doctor's work doesn't really begin. The hard work doesn't begin until after they graduate. Because what you were doing before, you might have felt the stress. Am I going to pass this test? Am I actually going to be able to graduate? Am I going to be able to pay off these student loans? You may have had the stress of those things. But once you graduate, then you have the stress of, this is a human in my care. Am I going to be able to help them? This is a human who's on the verge of death. What can I do to prevent that from happening? That's serious stress. And suddenly those student loans don't mean anything. Those tests, they have no problem. Who cares? They didn't have any value to them. Because now you're dealing with serious things. And so it is with this Christian walk. What we learned in VBS as children, looking around, I'm pretty sure all of us went to VBS. What we learned in VBS as children, those things are inconsequential to us today. We all know David and Goliath, Noah and the ark, Jonah and the whale. These things. But now there's so much more that we can draw out of those things. We think, oh, I know all that stuff. Once you get that attitude, then you're of no use to your fellow man. You're of no use to yourself. You can't be that nation of priests. You can't be the church of God without continuing to dig in, because when you dig into like Samson, you find out that account is not quite what you learned in Sunday school and children's church and VBS.
Well, not really sugarcoated, but
Yeah, it's exactly what it is.
Just to get that story
It's
started.
exactly what it is. It's a sugar-coated version.
Because when you think about, if you really look at him laying in the lap of Delilah, I mean, there's all kinds of things. You're like, oh, whoa, this guy was not the best dude.
He's
but
among the worst.
Kid, you're thinking, okay, he's doing this and doing that.
And Jonah, once again, same thing. We all knew the story of Jonah when we were small. But that account is very different when you dig a little deeper into it. I'm sorry, did I cut you off? Did you have more?
Oh, I was also thinking about, continuing to grow. We grow in the Lord through our testimonies, and realize that God has been with us through such and such. And that helps us to continue to grow, because we realize, God had my back at this certain time, and He's going to have my back again if I rely on Him. The effort that we have to put in mainly is to rely on Him.
Right.
And it sounds so easy, but it's one of the hardest things to do is to rely on the Lord and to ask the Lord to help us, and even to give us strength to pray, because in our minds, in our flesh, we don't want to pray.
Right.
We don't want to read our Bible. We don't want to go to church when it's 20 degrees. I mean, some do. But, we rely on the Lord for so much, and some of it we don't even realize.
Right.
Because like you say, you're getting in the car automatic. You get in the car and you drive to church automatic. But if the Lord was not directing our steps,
right.
we were not focused on Him, then we wouldn't want to. We'd roll back around in bed and say, forget this. It's 20 degrees outside. I'm going to stay in my warm bed, because you know what? Monday is coming, and I'm going to have to get up and go to work, because that's who, I got to pay my bills.
Right.
And that's what so many people are focused on. But when we're growing in the Lord and we're seeing what the Lord has done for us, then that helps us to continue to grow and to seek the Lord. And He shows us new things every day
when we're digging.
When we're digging and growing. Because like I said, with anything, even Brother Hector's concrete work, if he's a good concrete person, he's going to seek maybe a better way to do things, a quicker way to do things, quicker way to get out of the cold, what to do when it's cold, and your concrete needs to be set up. I don't know those things, but he's learning. Right. And maybe new tricks of the trade and new ways to do different things, and we're constantly learning and growing as a people. If we don't do that, we're just going to struggle.
We're going to die spiritually. I hope some of this has helped a little bit. But this is what Sunday school is about. I love it. I love it. I hate just sitting here reading. I hate that that's all that I do sometimes. I'm hoping someone getting something.
I think as well, when we think about leaning, we think about it in the sense of we put all of our weight onto something else. It doesn't take effort to continue to do that, because all of our weight is relying on something else. But when we think about leaning on Christ, I don't know if you all ever experienced this at youth camp growing up or anything, but we used to always play the game when it was swim time for the boys, who can throw who into the pool. And I love throwing people in the pool, but I hated being thrown into the pool.
Right.
So I would go and I'd find the fence and I'd begin to lean on the fence. But when you've got 4 or 5 other guys that are maybe a little bit bigger than you, a little bit stronger than you, that begin to pull against that, it doesn't matter how hard you lean, it takes a lot of effort on your part not to come away from the thing that you're leaning on. We need to realize that leaning, while it's a passive term in our minds and our physical bodies, spiritually, it's a very active thing for us to lean on Christ when we've got every force in the world pulling us away in everything that we do. It does take that striving to lean on Christ every day in everything that we do.
Now, just as you were speaking, it made me think it doesn't take a lot of energy to lean. There are times when it does. And as soon as you started talking, the very first thing that came to my mind was someone walking with a cane. Then thought someone walking with a walker. Then okay, all you folks are young. Okay, has anybody ever had a problem with your foot and you had to walk on crutches? That takes effort. If you've ever walked around a schoolhouse trying to carry your books, get to class, and walk on crutches, you know that takes effort. You are leaning on those crutches. But when you come home at the end of the day, you're far more sore than you would have been if you just walked around the hallways under your own power completely. And sometimes that's how it is with Christ. And also, as Wendy was saying, and as Pastor was saying, sometimes that's why we leave Him. I think about when I was walking with crutches. Okay, let's see, this is unpleasant. This is unpleasant. You know, it hurts when I walk on this foot that's broken, but not near as much as when I'm trying to carry myself around on these crutches. How about if I just toss these crutches aside and limp? That would be so much easier. And that's what many people many times do with Christ. This is so hard walking the way you want me to, God. It would be so much easier if I just tossed you aside and did this on my own. And then that what was a break and has been reset can quickly become a stress fracture, I believe. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that that's something that can happen if you walk on something that started to mend and it just gets worse.
And you can mess up your well leg too.
And another thing, I'm thinking about Mom, she broke her hip and had no idea. She walked around on a broken hip for, was it years? I know it was at least a year, had to been. And her back was killing her. She kept going to the chiropractor and she wasn't getting any better. Chiropractor said, you need to go find out what's wrong with you. You need to go to the hospital. I'm not doing you any good. When she went, she found out that the ball on the end of her femur snapped off. It wasn't connected. And all that bone was just digging around in her hip. And she was favoring the hip and didn't realize it. She didn't even realize she was favoring the hip. And that was throwing her back out of alignment. And that caused her more pain. And anybody who knew her before she hurt her hip, say she was a completely different person when she came back from New York. She fell at the bottom of an escalator in New York. Her face was different. Her attitude was different. She was in constant pain, and it changed her because she was walking without the proper hinge going on there, without that joint working like it was supposed to. And once she had her hip surgery, I think may have been 6 weeks, and she was a completely different person. She was walking without a walker, and that first hip surgery, it was like, boom, she was better. She was back to where she was. She was old Mom. She was no longer the cranky, mean, have to deal with her mom. She was fun-loving, happy, enjoyable to be around Mom. And that's what happens when we throw aside Christ. Our attitudes change. Our lives change. And it's never for the better. But just as Mom was able to get that hip surgery and get that problem fixed, we can experience that same kind of revolutionary change when we begin to trust in God. That mean everything in her life was perfect because her hip was fixed? No. She still struggled to pay the bills? Yep. Did she still struggle with smoking for the rest of her life? Absolutely. But the hip wasn't a problem. And so it is with our souls. We're going to struggle with something. Whatever it is in this life that we have, we're going to struggle with something. Jesus said, in this life ye shall have tribulation. I didn't do it. In this life ye shall have tribulation. It's our choice. What tribulation are we going to pick? Are we going to pick the tribulation of trusting God and knowing that He's going to get us through? Or are we going to trust in the consequences of not trusting God? Yes.
He says, be of good cheer, and that's sometimes what I struggle with.
Yeah. Yep.
But He does say that He gives us hope. Be of good cheer, for I am overcome. And
Wow.
He can help us through all those things if we allow Him to do it. If we allow the crutches to help us or get us to where we need to go, we allow God to help us. We
got to allow the crutches to do their work while the body heals. We got to allow that time that it takes to learn how to drive a manual transmission. We got to allow that time that it takes to begin to understand how to do a new job. We got to understand, as talking about doctor earlier, the new things that come up that we haven't experienced before in our patients. We have to lean on Christ. He'll give us the ability. But we have to deal with the human aspects of it. We have to put aside sin. We have to know enough, just as a doctor has to know enough about the symptoms to be able to diagnose an illness. We have to know enough about the spiritual symptoms to diagnose sin. But we don't diagnose it in each other. We diagnose it in ourselves. We have to have that knowledge. And the only way we're going to find it is if we continue to stay in God's Word and continue to stay in our prayer closets, so that God can supply us with what we need to get us through each day. Again, thinking about that same kind of thought. God gave you the ability to wake up this morning. Some people didn't have that luxury. God gave you the ability to get out of bed this morning. Some people didn't have that luxury. He gave you a job that helped you to pay for the vehicle that you're driving to church today. Some people don't have a car. But what we have, it came from God. And so it is spiritually. We need to understand that every good gift, every perfect gift comes down from the Father of lights. And if we trust Him, when it's hard, it'll get easier. And if we trust Him when it's easy, we'll be prepared when it gets hard. Because there are two assurances in life. You're going to have good times, and you're going to have bad times. So often we get distracted by the bad times and think, oh, well, this is happening to me, and so I have to be extra careful because I might fall away from God because these bad things that are happening to me. But the problem is, far too often we don't look at the other side and say, well, everything's good. And what we end up doing is saying, well, okay, everything's good. God, I don't need you right now. And then when something bad happens and we try to run back to Him, He says, I was there when you were happy and you ignored me. Do I have a responsibility to you now? Those are almost words that God has spoken in the Bible. It's a paraphrase for sure of something I know that I've read and I can't tell you where. And the prophets, I know. I am not going to get this lesson done, and I don't even care. Because